Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Akibatun lil Mustaqim. Wala Rufwana ila ala dalimin. Ate Subhanahu wa ta'ala amtanani wa shukri. Wa Muhammadin huwa Sayyidina Makbubana. Innahu kana Sayyidin Mursaleen. Salawatu Allah Ta'ala wa salamu alayhi. Ikhwanahu minna anbiya wa mursaleen ajma'in. Salawatu Rabbi taslimatihi alayhim. My brothers and sisters, I will continue on the tafsir of Surah Al-Fatih. Beautiful surah. Many lessons to be learned here. And this lesson 14 in particular, because it encompasses so much. And I will continue with this. And again, I am well aware how mundane a lot of this is. And it's not exciting, but it's for the real rounded Muslim who wants to be given education so he can come closer to Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. Because as I said before, if you want to move closer to Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, you must begin to master his great book. That will open up all the other doors of knowledge. Without that, brothers and sisters, we're left behind the 8 ball, so to speak. And so the fundamentals of Islam are a must. So let me give you my proper greetings. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi barakatuh. Lil Ikhwani wa Akhwati fi Deen. Salamu ala mani tabahuda lil Ikhwani wa Akhwati fi Africa, Europa, Asia, America, Caribbean, wa kulli makan. Ate lakum tahiti wa salami hadran. All right, my brothers and sisters, we'll get started here. This is very interesting because we're now talking about the beginning of the new Caliphate, or Caliphate in English language. And the Caliphate, or the Caliphate, is dependent upon you need Muslims in it. And without that, it's fruitless. You have to have believers. And so the situation with the Medina, where now the Caliphate was created, is surrounded by the Arabi, and so the desert Arabs. And I will not use desert Arabs anymore. I've been using this for a long time, and I will say this in Arabic for those who've been following, because then that way, you understand. But I said for the last time, desert Arabs, because that's how it's translated. But we know as the Arabi. And so the Arabi are scattered all through the vast Saudi Al Jazeera desert, Jazeera Arab desert. So now the point of bringing them into the fold of Islam was not an easy task. It was not an easy task. So we look at the verse here, verse 14. And Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, if you look at the Quran, you always find many of the verbiage here, these words in the Quran. Beautiful words. Where Subhanahu wa Ta'ala is always saying he is so merciful and forgiving. He is forgiving and he's merciful. And that gives all the Muslims hope. Because none of us are perfect. None of us can walk perfect through our life. You just cannot. Even when you wake up in the morning, you will sin. And variety of sins, of course. We're not talking major sins. We're talking about other things. But we cannot. This is why we must call upon Subhanahu wa Ta'ala and his mercy at all times. And this verse here, again, is signifying the same thing. And we'll get into the tafsir of this a little bit. Then I'm going to get into the history about the tenuous situation that the new Caliphate was in. Subhanahu wa ta'ala says, forgive me, brothers and sisters, I'm looking at the wrong things. Okay, yeah. وَلِلَّهِ مُلْكُ السَّمَوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ يَغْفِرُ لِمَنْ يَشَاءُ وَيُعَذِّبُ مَنْ يَشَاءُ وَكَانَ اللَّهُ غَفُورًا رَحِيمًا. This is Subhanahu wa ta'ala's words here. This is verse 14. Subhanahu wa ta'ala says in English, to Allah belongs the dominion of the heavens and earth. He forgives whom he wills and punishes who he wills. But Allah is oft forgiving and most merciful. This again is the hope even for the Arab that who are dwelling in the desert and who are engulfed with hypocrisy and insincerity. And so Subhanahu wa ta'ala in his wisdom is even saying here for them that he's there waiting for their admissions. So the mention of Allah as being forgiving and all merciful after the foregoing warnings contains in the subtle aspect of admonition. It means this: even now, if you give up your insincere attitude. Last 3 weeks I've been talking about, again, remember, the intentions, the sincerity, and the truthfulness of your intentions. Subhanahu wa ta'ala here knows the Arab. He understands them. He's exposed them. So again, here he's saying, yes, if you forgive, if you leave that, I am often forgiving. This is beautiful, and this is a hope for all of us. And you will find Allah forgiving and merciful. He will forgive you previous shortcomings and will treat you according to the quality of your sincerity in the future. Now, here, let me tell you what he's talking about here. Here we're talking about a situation where we have the Arabi and that's sitting in the Medina. He's inside the Caliphate now. He's near the Prophet ﷺ. And then the Arabi who are dwelling in the Sahara, which means desert. And he's saying, okay, if you forego your evil ways and your hypocrisy and insincerity, I will forgive you for this, and I will judge you according to your sincerity in the future. See, so this is a plus for the desert, the Arabi, because at this time many of them were so engulfed in hypocrisy, as we've been talking about. And I'm going to give you something here so that way you can do your homework. Here we got verses that are related to our topic at hand about the Arabi. And the emphasis is on Surah 9, verse 101, because this is important, because this goes to show you too that even though our Nabi, alayhi salatu salam, he's a human being, remember? He was not given everything. There's many things he did not even know, because he did not have the power, to where he knows everybody, every human being's heart. He does not. Whoever believes that is wrong in what they believe. And this is shirk billah, because you almost put him in the same category as Subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this goes to show you here in this verse, this last verse here in particular, Surah 9 was Surah Tawbah, which is a powerful, this is the surah where Subhanahu wa ta'ala was very angry, very, very angry, not with the Muslims, but with the Arabi and their treachery and their the killings of Muslims and stealing their wealth and so forth and so on. And so Subhanahu wa ta'ala here in Surah 9, verse 101, he says here, now listen to what he says here. This is interesting. This goes to show you he's advising the Prophet ﷺ. Certain of the desert Arabs around you are hypocrites, as well as desert Arabs among the Medina folk. Those in Yathrib, what now they call it Medina. They were there also doing what they do best, which is the insincerity, the untrustworthiness, the hypocrisy. They were there even next to the Prophet ﷺ doing this. They are obstinate in hypocrisy, though knowest them not. Here, subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling the Prophet, you don't know them. We know them. Subhanahu wa ta'ala says, we know them. Twice shall we punish them, and in addition shall they be sent to the grievous penalty. Now, this is something that's going to come up, and I will talk about this, because many of these will suffer in the dunya, and then of course they will suffer in the akhirah because of what they had done. Subhanahu wa ta'ala again has advised the Prophet ﷺ of the treachery of the Arabi, not all. Again, we know we're talking about some. And we're talking about some of these Qabail. It means clans, tribesmen, clans. And so we are left here with the thought in our mind that subhanahu wa ta'ala is really guiding our Prophet ﷺ and to warn him and to warn the Muslims about the Arabi because of their treachery. And he was right and to warn them because he knew what was in store for the Muslims. But the Prophet ﷺ did not know. Of course, he did not have this rape. He did not have this. Okay, he had some of it, but not all of it. And he could not predict every little thing. So I wanted to give you that so you can do your lessons and again give you roundabout education, Islamic education, because the Muslims should be well-rounded, even in the history, what led up to the verses, and what subhanahu wa ta'ala, his desires, and what he wants from us, and also some of the laws that transpired because of what has happened. Now you have a new Caliphate now, okay? You have a new Caliphate, so it's off and running, yes, but you're gonna have stumbling blocks. So this verse here, these verses here, from Surah 9 in particular, and there's one Surah 33 verse 20 as well. The emphasis on Surah 9 verse 101, because again, it shows subhanahu wa ta'ala is warning our Prophet, you don't know them. So you can imagine, here is subhanahu wa ta'ala giving you an indication of a people that are so wicked. And it's really, you can imagine how it is. It's a tenuous situation, a new Caliphate. You're surrounded by the Arabi in the Sahara. And so now things are starting to heat up. And so we'll go back up here now, and we will look at this verse here. And this is verse 90, Surah Toba again, that's Surah 9. And subhanahu wa ta'ala again is telling the story about the treachery of the Arabi. They did not want to go even in the battle. They didn't even want to go to the Umrah. They stayed back. So here we look at what the tafsir of it. Those with excuses among the Bedouins came to be permitted to remain, and they who had lied to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his messenger at home. So they stayed there at home. Again, we go back to the issue, as I've been talking about before, about the hood. We go back to my homeland, like where I was from, Compton, California. And we're a small city. And so we have to fend for ourselves. And, as little boys, sometimes we had little scrapes and skirmishes with brothers that lived above Rosecrans Elementary School. It's funny, I'll give you a story about that, but the school is where I went to. And I noticed something about the kids that were north of there, because now you go more going into the LA area. And we have skirmishes, with these kids. And it's funny, but we have skirmishes. And so here we have the brothers like on my street some are still alive now, and I love them dearly. And say some of us getting ready to go fight these brothers because of what they had done. And some of the brothers decided to lie to us and stay at home. They didn't want to go to fight these guys above Rosecrans Elementary School. See what I mean? This is the same thing that's happened here. I give you that analogy. I smile because my childhood, as you probably figured out, was something else. You know, it was a beautiful childhood. We in Compton, California at that time, with all the candy stores and the Mexican bakery and all that, and my dear brothers and sisters that I grew up with. So anyway, I give you that verse to help you to discern again, subhanahu wa ta'ala is again in this, even in this sort of talking about the treachery of not want to go and fulfill their jihad. They didn't want to do it. So now let's get into this. The Khalifa was new. And now the many of the Arabi tribes begin to come to make pledge, bay'ah. You remember that? Bay'ah. Bay'ah to the Prophet ﷺ. And so so anyway, as they begin to come, they many did give their pledges. Okay, many did give their pledges. But there was one person in particular that caught the eye of Bilal. And so, excuse me, brothers and sisters. Yeah, okay. Excuse me for a minute here. I had a little interruption. My wife here was talking to somebody here. Anyway, they came to make a pledge, but this one individual caught the eye of Bilal. This is Musaylima. Musaylima was sitting there as his Qabil came to make their pledge to the Prophet ﷺ. Musaylima gave his bay'ah, but not directly per se. He sat over and stayed next to the Jimal, the camels. Bilal saw him. Now you think about this. You have many of the tribes, the Arabi now coming to make pledge. Okay, hundreds are coming to make their pledge, Islamic pledge to the Caliphate and to the Prophet ﷺ. But he noticed Musaylima. So Bilal went to warn the Nabi ﷺ about Musaylima. But the Prophet ﷺ had already had some visions about him already, but he did not tell until Bilal talked to him. And this began the start of the saga of the treachery of the Arabi, many of the Arabi tribes that's laying out in the desert, in the Sahara. Musaylima and his clan, Bani Hanifa, pledged to the Nabi. Musaylima left with his clan. Now they made their bay'ah and left to go back to their territory, which you remember before, if I can, I think I still have it here. Yeah, there we go. Okay, you see over to your right, you see these, where he says Yathrib right there. This is the Medina. And you go over to your right, you see the Hanifa right there. And Tamim is above there. But this is where they had to go. It's a good distance away. And so he returned back to his territory. And shortly after that, he had some vision. He proclaimed himself to be a Nabi. That's right, brothers and sisters. He claimed to be a Nabi, a prophet. And so at this point, now, he sent a letter to our Prophet ﷺ, declaring his prophethood. And his letter was essentially comical, what he said. And I don't want to get into it because we have to go through a whole class because there's a whole lot of issues in this. And the Prophet ﷺ returned this letter and declared him to be the liar, to be a liar. a sheer liar. Thus, the infamous name Musaylima Kadab, okay, in English, Musaylima the liar, was born. He has been known through history as Musaylima the Kadab, the liar, because of the prophet exposed him and his letter, what he said to him, and so forth and so on. And so now the prophet ﷺ knew he was going to start to have problems. And again, as a new Caliphate, you know, he sent out his people to go to the tribes, the Qabilas, and to bring people to Tawheed. And he knew that this is going to be a tough sell in many of the Arabi that's in the Sahara. He knew it was going to be a tough sell. And so then, after the death of Prophet ﷺ, great many of the Arabi declared their apostasy from Islam. You see the treachery from why I've been harping on this for the last 3 or 4 days, how important it is, because these people were a threat to the new Caliphate. You cannot have a Caliphate if you have the Arabi and Jazir Arab who are not Muslims. How can you be? You can't run a Caliphate from one small city where you only have maybe 100 or 200 people. You won't be able to withstand the Romans, the Persians, and even any confederations of the new of the Arab tribes. You know, the Arabi. They wouldn't be able to fend. They did fend off for a while, but now there's no way. If they got a big confederation where they had Romans, Persians, and the Arabi, they would have probably took out the Caliphate. So the Caliphate was in a tenuous situation, and now with this thing, you had many. They say, okay, the prophet's dead. Hey, it's over for us. We'll go back to where we were. Others were slick. They feared the Muslims that they would grow and become powerful. So they were wise. So what they did, they come back now to Abu Bakr, radiallahu anhu. He was the first Khalifa. And so they begin to come to him and they say, okay, yes, we'll practice prayer. We'll do this. We'll do that. But we will not pay zakat. If you look at one of the verses that I gave you in there, subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about their payment and they don't want to pay. You see, and so they try to again make a distinction of the 5 pillars. So they said, some said, I will practice, I won't give you zakat, but I will let my people pray, but I won't give you zakat. Most of them went to this direction where they didn't want to pay zakat. See, so and they say, yeah, we'll go to Hajj and Umrah, but we will not pay you zakat. And so this became a big battle cry. Now they had no Abu Bakr, radiallahu anhu, decided now we have to do something. There was his Ashura. Now you know in Islam we have a Ashura council. A Ashura council are the trusted wise men around the Amir Mu'mineen or the Khalifa, and everybody discusses options within the Islamic State. And then the Khalifa makes the final decision, but he's given counsel first. This is the beauty of Islam. It's not where you have some big king and he just make any decision he wants. He has no others around him to counsel. Islam was that way. Even the Prophet Islam, he had a sure counsel around him, trusted people, Omar radiallahu anhu, Ali, his cousin radiallahu anhu. I mean, he had many around him to give him good counsel and to discuss issues. This carried on with the rest, like Abu Bakr and so forth and so on. They debated hotly about this issue. Some of the Sahaba decided, we should not fight them because they're new. We want to keep them in the fold of Islam. And we'll come back another time to them and see if we can get them to come pay zakat. And others said, no, it's time we have to go and do something about it because it's going to spread. And it did spread. And when they figured that the Muslims were doing nothing, great many began to adopt this theory. Okay, we won't pay zakat. I won't pay you for my wealth, but we will pray. But Abu Bakr said, no, we will not have this. And the apostasy wars begin at this time. And this was led to other things. As the word came out that the Muslims were going to come and basically deal with the apostates, many of the clans begin, again, the Arabi and the Sahara begin to go on killing sprees. They start acting crazy. And they apostated out, but then they begin to kill people who they caught praying. Even in their own village, they begin to kill those who praise the prophet. Many of the Arabi in their villages, they say, you cannot mention his name. You cannot even pray. And you still said you kept your pledge that you did to the Prophet, they will put you to death for it. And so all of these who were killed, some had their nose taken off, some had their ears taken off. And there's a story about Khalid Saif Allah, when he went to some of these Arabi and what happened, what they did to the Muslims. But I can't get into that because it's another story in itself. So this is what was happening. Now, as I said, it started the apostasy wars, and due to their strong disbelief and hypocrisy, as Subhanahu wa Ta'ala has warned us here, he's warned us of them. He warned the Prophet at the time about them. Now, Abu Bakr, radiallahu anhu, he is understanding of it because he's now midst of rebellious Bedouins formed a confederation to fight the Muslims. And the federation was massive. It was massive, brothers and sisters. And so they began to have some of the other smaller tribes of the Arabi fought the Muslims, but they were wiped out quickly. They were taken out with very little bit of Muslim brothers being slain, martyred, very few. But here's a situation, brothers and sisters, that I have to mention, which goes to show you the depth of what I've been talking about, the Arabi, okay, for a couple of lessons now, to show you the length of their treachery. They sent an emissary to the Prophet before he passed on, asking for the Prophet to send the scholars. Can you believe the ulama that's there inside the Medina, who were hafiz in the Quran, who knew the laws and who can teach Islam? They begged the Prophet to do this. So he sent approximately about 60 with these emissaries to go to teach these alleged new Muslims. When they got them into Sahara, they martyred them, brothers and sisters. This is the Arabi in the Sahara. They murdered them. And this made the Prophet ﷺ very angry. And this is why I was explaining why I've been on this about the desert Arabi, why I told you black man in America, about your relationship with them there in the United States. And that many of these are they took the fikr, the concept of their ancestors like these. And those are the ones you see who do what they do to you there in the United States. Sell you pork, sell you wine, sell you beer. They show hypocrisy. They smoke cigarettes. They align themselves with the pbuh against the African Americans. See, this is the same one. And why I've been talking about it. Now here they lured the ulama, and the Prophet did not know. He did not know. Again, she goes to show you that he was a human being. He was a prophet, yes, but he didn't know everything. So he went on and ordered it, and he slaughtered and martyred those 60 scholars. This is the depth of what I was talking, the depth of their hypocrisy and their insincerity. They're good at coming to you, showing you one face, but they had something else in mind. They slaughtered 60 from the ulama there in the new Caliphate, way in the desert. So now, here's the interesting part to this. We had two others declare their prophethood. One was a woman, and another one was another man. This man, Tuleha, was not he wasn't Musaylama, but he was still bad, because anybody declared themselves to be a prophet, they can't be good. But he will come back to Islam in another time. I won't get into that. But he had also wars with the Muslims, and he was taken out. His people were taken out quickly. This lady here, let me tell you about her, Sajja. She was she had gotten a big contingency. She came to power in her Kabila through devilish treachery. Okay, devilish treachery. There was things happening that this woman saw that only the devil basically could. That's the best way I can say it. I'll give you an example. What one of the things I was talking about here. Well, one of there was Christians also that lived among in some of these the Arabi. They were Christians, and there were Muslims as well. And there was an incident of a horse, and this horse was a black horse, and they got him from the Sahara, and he was very, very, very strong, and nobody could handle him. They corralled him in, but no one can get on him. No one could do anything with him. They could only feed him, water him. That's it. They could not do. If you get close to him, he would kill anybody who got close. He'll kick you. And the horse, very, very strong. They can kill you. They break your leg, arm. They can crush your skull. If they hit you, they're very strong. And this false prophetess went into the corral with this horse, and he calmed him down. She calmed him down. But as the way she did it was struck the ire of some of the Muslims, that it wasn't natural. And she came to power, and then she began to control many other smaller tribes who were scared of her because they know she was working with the devil. In private, they knew this, but of course, in public, they couldn't because now they're afraid of her because she would slay them. She went on to become the wife of Musaylima. This was a confederation, and this was a sham marriage. And the conditions of this, what kind of conditions of this was funny, that they married, and they were married for 3 days. And then in this time, they would, act as an Islamic marriage, but then after that, they'll go their separate ways. This is not Islam. This is what I'm saying. They had, changed the tenets of Islam. And so they went their separate ways. She formed an army herself. Now, Khalid, he's a Muslim now, okay? He's a Muslim now. He was given the title of Saif Allah. He was sent, and there was a strategy because Musaylima had orchestrated a huge amount of apostates, and they were powerful. And they had skirmishes with some of the smaller Muslim forces, and he defeated them. That's right, Musaylima defeated them, and they became bold. So Abu Bakr, radiallahu anhu, he decided, said, look, okay, I'm going to put out a lie out there in the Sahara to say that we're coming to get him, because they want to tie him down to an area so that way Khalid can take out all these other tribes, take them out, and then he can concentrate on destroying Musaylima. It was an ingenious plan, and it worked. So Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu sent Ikrimah, one of the companions who later came to Islam. I won't get into his story, but now he's a full-fledged Muslim. He was a general for a smaller force. He was ordered to go near Musaylima, but not to engage him. And there's reports. The scholars have kind of different mixed reviews about what happened, if it actually happened or not. And I'll give you what was told, that when he found out that Khalid was defeating many of these Arabi tribes, he decided he was going to get the glory. Now, this is what they're saying he felt. But other scholars said, no, he was not this way. But, we were not there, so we can only report what was written. And so anyway, he went to engage Musaylima, and he was defeated. And so this was again, Musaylima was really, really beaming with confidence. But he stayed in the area of Al-Yamama. And I showed you on the map that area where you see Hanifa, the area there you see is in this kind of red. In this area there, you see Hanifa. Then over to the right, you see this is where they were held up at. he had a contingency of 40,000, and that's a lot of people in that day. And these people were battle hardened apostates. They were not going to come to Islam irrespective of what the Abu Bakr and the Muslims what they would say. They didn't care. So anyway, they began to form their alliances to fight the Muslims, and then in one battle, this false prophetess, she was killed, and Khalid killed her. And he had famous words to say to her when he knocked her off a horse. And he went over her. And before he slayed her, he made a declaration to her. And he told what his sword was there for, because he was Saif Allah. Saif Allah means the sword of Allah. So he explained before he killed her what this sword was meant to do. And it was meant for this, because Khalid was a hardened soldier. He was the only one to defeat the Prophet ﷺ. You remember that. And so he was a battle-hardened man. Now he's under the Islamic banner. He is now, subhanahu wa ta'ala is giving him the generalship of giving him knowledge, great knowledge now. He already had knowledge, but now he was given great knowledge from subhanahu wa ta'ala. And also he followed the guise of the Prophet ﷺ. And so he was a strategist, a brilliant, expert, genius, a military genius. And so he encountered Saja, and he knocked off a horse, and he put her, she was on the ground, and he had a foot on her, and then he slayed her. But he gave her a speech before he slayed her. And now they can concentrate on dealing with Musaylima, because Musaylima now was we can't be defeated, and more begin to come to join in with him. And so again, brothers and sisters, you can imagine the new Caliphate surrounded by the Arabi and the Sahara. Many of them have defected, and now many of them were coming to fight the Muslims. But subhanahu wa ta'ala had a different plan, and he gave directions to Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, gave him good directions. And you could think about this with a force that was small. And if you look at Surah Anfal, subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you directions on how many Muslims is needed to fight disbelievers. And at the beginning it was 10 to 1. But in later time, subhanahu wa ta'ala said, no, 2 to 1. So a force twice as big was okay for the Muslims to encounter. And the Muslims begin now to make their trek to Al-Yamama. And so, this, if we can imagine how this was, you had the ulama inside, the rest of the ulama, which you had many who were hafiz in the Quran and so forth and so on. They came to join the jihad. And so the battle was ensued. But let me give you just one little backdrop on this too. Before the battle started, Khalid, radiallahu anhu, the Arabi had this cultural, traditional thing of manhood. And you heard me talk about this in another course, where the two forces are about ready to meet, okay, in the Sahara. And what they will do, they will issue a challenge, an individual challenge. And so like Khalid will come out, he's the general of the force, he will come out, and he said, Manuel Baris, who wants to fight? And one of the champions from the disbelievers will come, and they go Mubarak, so they will have a duel. And so they had this duel, and the Muslims defeated in their individual duels. Okay, there was 3 or 4, I can't remember, 3 or 4 of these, I think, individual duels, and they defeated them. So Musaylima was now saying, now look here what we have here. And then one of the brothers who was hafiz in the Quran, who always reads Surah Anfal before the battle, began to talk to all the apostates who were under Musaylima. And he began to talk, he read off the letter basically to the apostates, because they didn't know that the letter was sent by the prophet to Musaylima. And some of them now became worried. This was a chilling effect, because here you had one of the scholars from ulama of the Muslims from the Caliphate. He began to discuss the letter that the Prophet sent to Musaylima, the Kadab. Okay, bottom line. And now it was, they had the people upset. And this is a good strategy. So the battle began in earnest. And it went on for a couple of days, brothers and sisters. And Muslims these guys were great fighters, these in the Sahara. If you know anything about some of the battle and the battle-tested strategies that the Arabi have, they're very interesting. And again, there's certain strategies that are used in war with knives and with swords and so forth and so on. You find this in Africa, especially as well. Especially if you look at our ancestral brothers, like in Senegal and the Senegambia region and so forth. I talked about their prowess as far as hand-to-hand combat, because this is hand-to-hand combat, brothers and sisters. This is man-up time. This is not something that you have today where like you have U.S. forces who stand back 40, 50 kilometers back and they use howitzers and they use military madness from the air to drop bombs and the people don't touch one another. Here, you're going to be touched, bottom line. And they were going at it. It's man to man, okay? So you're going to either slay or you're going to be slain. That's how it was in those days. So the people began to fight, and they had and Khalid was strategizing and so forth. It was a difficult battle because remember, it was 40,000 of them, and it was roughly between 12 to around maybe near 15,000 Muslims. So, it was more than two, it was almost 2.5 so it's 2.5 apostates to one Muslim, essentially. And so this is the great battle was ensuing. Khalid had another strategy also to help to get them. Because he knew Musaylima Kadab was a vain man. And so when Khalid switched some of his individual horsemen with him, Musaylima and some of his other trusted bodyguards were over to the other side. The Muslims were fighting the Musaylima's troops, and they were going at it. Khalid met Musaylima on one side of the battlefield, and he began to talk to Musaylima, the Kadab, and so forth. And he began to make again, using their treachery like they've been doing on the Muslims, on the Prophet Islam, and on Abu Bakr, he now is going to use treachery, which you can use this strategy in war, because it's been approved by our Prophet Islam. He began to tell him, he said, look, when we get together now, I'm ready for this. We divide up the Jazira Arab among us. And he tried to lure Musaylima close enough. What happened this time, there was one Habashi, okay, Habashi is Abyssinia, or we know today as Ethiopia. And remember, Bilal is Habashi. And so he was the one who killed the uncle of the Prophet Islam in one of the infamous battle where the Muslims lost. And he killed him. He came up to Khalid and told Khalid, said, why are you going to lure him? He said, I can get him now. I can take, because he was an expert on throwing the spear. Now the brothers, from Africa are very good at this. You know that. I mean, the brothers, especially from West Africa and East Africa in particular, they're good at throwing, these heavy javelin type spears. And they can throw them with force because they were big and strong. So they can throw the javelin, and it works very well. And it's a good strategy in war. But here, this situation here, where you had Musaylima, he tried to lure him even closer, but Khalid wanted to slay him. He wanted to take his head, because if he took his head at this time, it would cause the ranks and his flanks around the Yamama to give up and run and flee. So what happened was Khalid told what's his name? I can't think of his name. Excuse me. I'm sorry. I had a blank there. I can't think of his name. Excuse me. But he told him, no, don't slay him here. I want to get him. I want to get him. So he told him to back off. So he backed off. And then what happened was they began to shoot arrows and everything to make them flee. Musaylima the Kadab was scared. He was scared. And he began to order his troops. This was a calculation on his part. When they began to flee, the Muslims came from many of the directions, began to slay many of the apostates, and the slaughter was going on. There was a well-fortified garden. Musaylima al-Kadhab sent his people into this fortified, and it was a high wall surrounded and so forth, in this beautiful garden. And he went in there and he closed the big heavy gates. Now they were trapped. Musaylima and about 7,000 apostates were inside this garden. So Khalid, right, he had to figure out. So some of his generals came and they discussed how they were going to do it. So he sent one of the trusted Sahaba who made an idea to Khalid, right, and say, look, why don't we do this? I'm going to climb when it gets kind of, we'll wait. And then when it gets near dark, I will go and climb over one area where it's the weakest part of the garden. I'll climb over there and go and open up the gate. So he did, and he encountered some of the apostates. He killed them, but he got cut. He got he got wounded, but he made enough. He had enough strength to get to the gates, and he opened up the gates, and the Muslims come into the garden, and the battle continued to go on. Inside there, now we had I can't think of his name. Washi. He began to follow Musaylima as Musaylima was being protected by his bodyguards. Here he is with his javelin. When he found the opening, he went and he threw it and he slayed Musaylima al-Kadhab. And then from this point, they began to rout the rest of the apostates and they slaughtered them. There was none left. So out of the 40,000, they said maybe 2,000, maybe even less that was left. But you think about this. Here's the new Caliphate, brothers and sisters. All these soldiers, all these battle-hardened Arab who were good in battle, decided to fight as apostates and go into the hellfire as apostate. And so the Caliphate was off to a bad start in this regard because some of its best soldiers were killed. Many of our favorite Muslims at this time were killed. They said, again, they were talking about upwards of 38,000 apostates lost their lives. In this battle alone, and 7,000 apostates held up in fort, as I explained to you, they were slaughtered. The Muslims, it was over. There was no more talking. There was no more. They gave them a chance to say, come back to the fold of Islam. They said no. And you know the three conditions about Islam. The Prophet taught Khalid, and you accept Islam. If not, then you take jizya. If you refuse that, then you take the sword. This is the conditions, the Islamic conditions before you have battle. So you give the adversary a chance. You can come to Islam, okay, and you be among the brotherhood of Islam. Second, if you don't want to do that, but you want to live under the Khalifa, then you pay a tax, a jizya, okay, a tax. Third, if you say no to both two, now it's on. Man to man, man up. We're going to deal with you. We're going to fight you. And this is the conditions. Since they said no to the first two conditions, they had to fight them. And they were not going to let them live. So they slaughtered them because they were too far gone. They were hardened apostates. And the Caliphate was already hurting. So now it was time to put a new face to get rid of these apostates, which they did. And so you got to understand something why I've been talking about leading you up to this point, brothers and sisters. Because the new Islamic State was betrayed by the Bedouin brethren. They betrayed them big time, who made their pledge without conviction. They came to make pledge, but it was nifaq. Okay, it was nifaq, meaning treachery. It was false. And began to undermine the Islamic State right after their felonious pledge. Can you believe that? They began already plotting against the Islamic State when they hear they made pledge in front of the Prophet, smiling, shaking his hand. And then they went from the Medina and began to plot against the Muslims. This is how bad, why subhanahu wa ta'ala has concentrated a lot on the Arabi from the Sahara because of what they had done. And now you understand why I've been talking about them and why I'm educating my brothers inside the United States about some of these who are descendants from some of this type of element who were noted for their treachery and for their felonious pledges and smile in your face and cut you in the back. But this is basically a human trait, brothers and sisters. I mean, it's not only the Arabi from the Sahara. We got African Americans the same way. We know them, they smile in your face, do the same. This is a human trait. But here we're concentrating on the Islamic model because the Caliphate was in trouble and they had to clean up these apostates. Now, they tried to make a distinction, as we talked about, and they had no other choice. They even created prophets among them. They used treacherous schemes to lure the scholars, which I explained to you, and then they butchered the scholars. This is their brethren. These are all Arabi. Even in Medina, they're Arabis. They're Arabs, and they butchered their brothers because they were fanatical and they were devil-filled. And so they wanted to make sure that they take out the Muslims. And how to do it is, if you take out the scholars, how are you going to teach the people? See, and this was an ingenious plan on their part to take out the scholars. And he went to the Prophet, as I explained to you, and asked him to send his ulama to the Sahara to train. It was a false asking of the Prophet for this. They didn't want that. They wanted to get the ulama out there and kill them because they had a strategy to kill Islam. If you take away all of your learned people, how are you going to teach the people? It's going to be very difficult. Now, after the apostasy wars, many returned to the fold of Islam. But see, I don't blame you. You think about this, brothers and sisters. Okay, you think about this. Let's look at this from a standpoint of Compton, California, where I'm from. Say back in the hood where we at. Now we have now whipped the other brothers who were bothering us, okay, a little bit on the outside of Compton. And remember the Mukhalifin among our brothers in Compton who did not want to go down with us to go fight the other brothers. Because in my days, we started to fight we had hand-to-hand fights. You know how it was in those days. You had to learn how to fight, and you had hand-to-hand fights, didn't you? Until later, now the gun became prevalent. Here, we still have hand-to-hand fighting. Okay, as little boys, and also I was known for, as if some of the brothers in Compton where I grew up, they'll tell you I was known for rocks. I was good at throwing rocks, and I would throw rocks sometimes in my defense. Go against these guys. There's too many of them. I would throw rocks. So I was famous for that. They knew that. But if they had me running, sometimes I'd fight with boys. I would run to one field where there was rocks. They knew that. The minute I started to run to the field, I got to the field before they can come, they would begin to run off because I would throw the rocks. I was bad. I was a bad little boy, but that's another story at that time. And so the apostasy wars, now many of the Arabi began to come. We know many of them did the same thing again. They came only out of fear because they feared Khalid in particular because they knew Khalid could not be defeated because they knew his title, Saif Allah. So they said, okay, we'll come back, we'll do everything you say. But again, remember, we have a ruling. We can't judge what's in the heart, but we can only judge by the action. So they began to practice Islam, but they were not trusted and they were not allowed to go on military excursions until later. And then they came to prove their worth, and they did big time. Many of the Arabi clans who were not allowed to fight at the beginning, they had famous soldiers with them. These guys from the Sahara were good at fighting, brothers and sisters. They know how to use a sword, they knew how to use a knife. They were very, very well adapted in war. And when they began to use them, it was the Romans even talked about the type of strategy of how to fight the Arabi. They never seen anything quite like this. And the Persians too saw how the Arabi, when they began to bring them from the Sahara to fight, now they trusted them and brought them in to prove their mettle in this jihad. And so this is something that is noteworthy because the Romans talked about them and also the Persians talked about them, the style, how they fought, because now they had fought the Medina Muslims. Okay, but when they begin to add the brothers from the Sahara, now they had a different style of fighting. The Romans talked about that. The Persians talked about that. And some even of the treacherous Arabi who were from Syria and so forth, who aligned themselves to the Roman, they had to encounter the Arabi from Sahara and present-day Saudi Arabia, and they saw the way they fought, which was different as well. So I'm just giving this backdrop, brothers and sisters, because we should be well-rounded in our history, so you can understand what happened to the Caliphate. You can understand the verses what we talk about. Why subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the Arabi, because it's important, because I gave you the story to outline the importance of the Quran and how it explains about them. And it should help you in your present day with dealing with the same type, this caliber in Compton or in LA or in Phoenix, Arizona, in places where they're at. They said roughly 360 who were memorized the Quran. Hafiz means the memorization of the Quran, were martyred. This was a big problem, brothers and sisters. These scholars, many were gone. Remember, we had lost 60 to the Arabi previously in the Sahara by the treachery. 360 went on jihad and they were martyred. They were martyred in the Battle of Yamama. And so the Caliphate now they won. They had gotten their the Caliphate now was strengthened, and they decided that. And this is where there's a lot of conjecture about this, and many scholars wrote about this. And it was Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu decided that he was going to do the Quran. And this is how this became, brothers and sisters. Because since we lost so many Hafiz in the Quran, we lost many who understood the Sharia, the new Sharia of the Muslims, of Islam. And so now they wanted to compile a book, the Quran, and this is how it started right after the apostasy wars and so forth and so on. So they got all of the revelations that the Prophet ﷺ, what he said, because many had copies and so forth and so on, and they were using that. So individual families had parts of the revelations. So all the families who had these, the trusted families who had these, they began to compile them, and then they got favorite people who were very well rounded in Islam. They begin to now go hand to hand, copy, and they begin to form the Quran and make books. This is how we got the Quran today, brothers and sisters. So I wanted to give you that story about this, because I know this is long, but I wanted to give you a story. It may be mundane to some people, but for me, it's a joy to talk about the Quran and talk about the stories that are in it and about the history, to well-round my education as a Muslim, because I can be able to talk about this when someone talks about the Arabi. I'll be able to talk about the Arabi. I can talk about the verses when someone comes to me and say, no, you're a lie, you're a racist, Yahya, you talk this and that. I said, no, I'm not racist against them. How? Because I have their blood in my system too. I'm not racist against them. But I had to bring out what they said here in the Quran, and about their treachery, because their treachery was massive. And they almost led to the collapse of the new Caliphate, which subhanahu wa ta'ala said he was not going to let this happen. But you had to have some worry. You had many people worried, because you think about this. I mean, Musaylima Kadab was he had gathered 40,000 apostates, and they were gaining victories on smaller Muslim forces. So it was quite a nervous time, but the Muslims prevailed. And they did prevail in big time, and they went on to fight the Romans, and they expelled the Romans, and they went on to fight the Persians, who are the Iranians as we know today, expelled them. And now we had Jazira Arab under the belt of the Caliphate. This is a beautiful thing, brothers and sisters, this history, and you should know it. It helps you well-rounded. So those who are in school, those who hear things talk, you'll be able to explain. When you hear this thing about, you hear most of the time the Muslims threw the Romans out. They had no reason. They were interlopers. They have been colonizing. They're not Arabi. They're Romans. They're Europeans. They're Tubab. They were there as interlopers and conquerors and occupiers. They need to be expelled, and they were expelled. So, brothers and sisters, I will conclude this today, and I'm hoping that you did get something out of this, which I did. I have enjoyed to talk about the story in the Quran. And talk about the history of our religion and the early parts. So, my brothers and sisters, For those who support me, thank you for supporting me again, and I appreciate this. And I'll leave you with the beautiful words of Jinnah. Assalamu alaikum. Rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.